Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel. My name is Eve, and this is a channel about art, helping you to gain the skills that you need to do your own art. And today we are talking about some of the first steps of learning to draw what you see. So this is still life drawing. That's so that you can learn to see the objects in front of you, the shadows, the shapes, not necessarily the colors, because it doesn't have to be in color. And I recommend that after this, it's more or less a step-by-step, but after this that you set up everyday objects in your house and see if you can draw them. You can, at the art stores, get quite large newsprint pads, and that way you have space to draw these, and you don't have to draw smaller. The newsprint pads are actually quite inexpensive. So today I have set up a simple still life. It's not a standing up like a bowl of fruit or anything, because that would be difficult for me to show you. I'm going to move this out of the way, and you are going to be seeing what I'm drawing, and occasionally I may bring it back to emphasize a point. I'm going to be using pastel pencils today, but you can use charcoal pencil, whatever you have to work with, but preferably something that you can blend a little bit. So I'm going to move this up out of the way, hopefully without moving it, jiggling it. And I'm going to try to make sure that the whole drawing is in the picture, so bear with me a bit. But this is a gray tone paper. I like drawing on things other than white, but you can certainly use white. And or you can use any other color that you can find paper in. This is a simple pastel pencil set, and I have a pencil sharpener, I have something to blend, and I have a kneaded eraser. I recommend all of those things before you start drawing, or something similar. If you don't have all of those sitting in front of you, go ahead and take the time to get that now. You will also need something to put the pencil shavings in, because you tend to do a lot of sharpening while you're doing something like this. Now, I'm going to start with the first basic shape, and because this is pastel pencil, my white pencil has gotten a little grunge on it, and that's because I was using it on top of something else and blending it. And if that happens to your white, be sure and sharpen that off first, or you will not have white when you're trying to draw, and that can be frustrating. And you can also get it off by running it on a blank piece of paper, but I prefer to just sharpen it off. Okay. And the reason I'm starting with white is because my main object is the oval of the canvas. And there are ways to make your oval perfect, but this is a learning still life drawing, and it's not something we plan to sell, maybe not even keep. But you can certainly use a string with a center, but you have to remember the string will make a circle, but try to learn to draw simple shapes like ovals without anything. And I want to make sure that I'm not going to go past certain areas on my paper, and you probably can't see what I'm drawing here, but I'm putting little lines that I don't want to go past these spaces on my drawing for my oval, to give myself a little border And I'm hoping that you can see the marks that I've put. Let me make them a little darker. Normally I wouldn't make these very dark because I generally erase these later. And if you're not really good at keeping in the center of the paper, you can, you want to try to center this as much as possible. You can find the center, especially if you're not planning to keep this, by folding the paper this way and of course up that way, and that'll give you the center mark. And our center mark is right about here. So we want to try to keep this as centered in the paper as possible, but we want the bottom part of the oval to show that the canvas is 3D. So here we go. And if I'm not happy, I'm drawing very lightly so that I can make changes if I want. And I am not going all the way down to my bottom line because I'm making the 3D of the canvas. And I'm pretty happy with that oval. If I were making this for sale, I would, of course, make sure that that is exactly the shape that I want. But I don't erase and erase and erase and erase. It ruins your paper and you generally don't get anywhere with that. So try to work with what you've drawn as much as possible. If you do feel like you need to erase, draw lightly enough so that a light touch with the kneaded eraser will take it off, like those little lines. I still have this line down here because I'm still using it. I hope you can see that. It looks bright enough. Okay, and then I'm going to draw this, and that gives me the 3D of the canvas. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and, color this whole thing white because I have objects that are going to go in there. Now, I'm not going to use white to draw all of them because they're not white. And it's easier to see if I'm drawing with a darker color. I'm going to go ahead and use a black, but very, 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 very lightly for the other objects, just to draw their outlines and just their basic outlines. We do have to remember that there's shadow, and that's the whole point, is learning to draw what we see, not what we think is there. So the paintbrush is going to the end of the canvas. I didn't sharpen it completely tight with a point. It's not necessary, and it's just it just breaks off, and it's not. So I'm going to put a line for this first. It's going, I don't want to keep moving the object back and forth because they're just balanced there, but I'm going to move it back so you can see what I'm talking about here, right here. Okay, so I'm going to start with this paintbrush, even though this one is underneath, because this one is kind of my baseline of the top. I'll put this one on later. And then I'll do the basic shapes of these, but I also have to remember to draw these shadows. If you can see these shadows in here, that's part of the picture. And it won't look 3D. Oops, I moved it. It won't look 3D if you don't draw the shadows. So I'll put this back where you can see it again. All right, so I'm just, as I said, if we draw lightly, we can change it. And I'm drawing a diagonal line. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody's going to go back and look at the shape and make sure that you drew it exactly right. Now, this paintbrush is wider at the bottom than it is. I didn't make those bristles long enough. And see what I mean about drawing lightly so that then you can just take a little bit off. Do not spend a lot of time erasing. You're never going to be perfectly happy. Just have confidence, commit to it, draw a line, but draw it very lightly so that you can change minor things. Now, this isn't straight. I'm not worried about that right now. But if I wanted to make sure it was straight, I would use this. That's what these are for, you know, and I would go and I'd say, okay, yeah, that is way off. I need to make it straight. And I would draw it straight. But since we're going to put a lot of shadow on, it's really not necessary. Okay, so I'm going to draw the shadows of this paintbrush after I draw some of the other stuff. So now the other paintbrush, they're going off the edge of the canvas, okay? The other paintbrush I'm going to put right here. I'm not sure if that's exactly where it is, but that's where I've decided that it's going to go. And again, go ahead and find objects, everyday objects around your house. Stick a banana on a table, draw it. You don't have to draw in color, but it does help to learn to put color now and then. Okay, so now this paintbrush, we need to remember to draw the shapes, draw what we're seeing. This paintbrush is an angled paintbrush, so I have to remember to put the angle on that. All right. Now, the edge of one of the, in my view, the edge of one of the paint tubes is going up over. I'm just going to draw the top of the cap. It's a little bit in from the, and then I go over. This is a circular thing. If you draw a straight line, it won't be right. We give it the rest of its shape later. Now, I'm not worried about that right now. Don't erase that right now. It doesn't matter, because this isn't what the final thing is going to look like. Make sure that you have a rounded cap. Excuse me. So that's the first one. Now we're going to draw the one that's under here. One of the things I do recommend, if you have things going on top of the other and you're not sure and you're drawing, you want to try to make sure that your line is relatively, you know, that you're drawing them, that you're not drawing this side and then putting the other one over here. You need to kind of make sure that they're going on from the same point. Okay, I don't know if I'm making any sense. And this is where the cap is going to go. The cap is indented, and here we even see it more. I'm probably putting this a little too close to this paintbrush, but as I said, I'm not going to worry about that too much. Okay. And then the other side of the paint tube, and I'm drawing these paint tubes way too big. They're going to the edge of the canvas, and in real life they're not. You can adjust that if you want. And your drawing is not going to look like my drawing, and your drawing is, you know, well, you're not even looking at it. You're just kind of going by what I'm going. So, and as I said, right now we're not doing the finished, we're just blocking in where things are going to go. Then we have a paint tube going this way, and your paper is not nailed onto the table, and it is difficult for your hand to, you can't draw like this, so move the paper. Just make sure that you're still, I've decided that this paint tube is way too long. And that's what I mean about drawing lightly enough that it's relatively easy to fix. But once you have a lot of things on top of it, don't try to fix it then, because it'll be too hard. You miss too many things. Now, this one is just on its side, so I'm just seeing a tip of this right here. And the edges of the lids come together. Draw this a little bit differently here. Now this one is going to curve this way because of the way we're seeing it. And I'm going to point that out to you here in just a second as soon as I'm finished drawing this part. But I can't see the rest of this paint tube because this one is right in front of it. And I only see part of this one because there's a paint tube sitting on top of it. I've already worn down my pastel pencil quite a bit. I'm going to need to sharpen it in a minute. Now, I am getting, these not exactly where the other one is, where they are in the picture, and I'll show you what my errors are. I'm not going to change it, okay? Because changing it is, at this point, not helpful to the drawing. So here's the end of the last paint tube. We'll put in the shadows and the shape in a minute. So this is what I've drawn. Obviously the shapes aren't exactly correct, but we're going to work on that. Okay, so I'm going to show you what my errors are here. So this is pretty much okay, but I probably can make this, one just a little bit longer. You see how they come together here. And this one is not going at the right angle, but they're close enough that I'm going to say, it's okay. Because, as I said, if you keep going at it and keep going at it and keep going at it, you don't really make it better, you just make it different. In case I haven't mentioned, my drawing table is at an angle, so when you see things slip, that's why. It has a little bar at the bottom so things don't fall off, but it makes it easier for me to draw, to not have it flat. Okay, so I am going to make one minor adjustment on this one. The shape of the tube is kind of weird, and I'm going to just angle it a little bit more this way. But I didn't make a huge change. And I noticed that Actually, I may change it more than what I just said, so I'm making a liar of myself. But you see how now I'm getting residual pencil here? That's one of the things that you're trying to avoid. But what I'm doing is I'm just changing the angle of this to come at a different angle up here. And that's so that when I draw shadow in later, it makes more sense. One of the things when you erase and there's other lines there, it makes it difficult to see what you're doing. And I'm going to shorten that here. And that one will make sense later. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my white. I'm not going to put it in solid, you know. I have a lot of other stuff that's going to go on, the shadows of these. But I'm going to draw them with a little bit with the, you know, bringing the white up in here. And of course these paint tubes are white. But I'm just using this to kind of give me a base as to where those shadows are going to go. But you can draw them just, you can do this with, you know, if you're just drawing in one color, you can go ahead and do that. I'm not drawing the actual shadows. I'm drawing around the shadows, if that makes sense. This all in here, from my vantage point, is shadow. And then there's shadow in here, but I can't draw it with this because there's no white on the board there. Okay, and then there's shadow under here. And then I see a little bit of light peeking out right here. That was my notifications on my phone. I apologize. I keep forgetting to turn it on airplane when I'm doing this. So, okay. So now that I have that kind of blocked in, this is the basic shape, but it doesn't really look like anything. And it doesn't look like anything because we haven't put any contour. So I'm going to very lightly, I'm going to start with the canvas. It is the easiest part of this. I'm very, 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 very lightly going to put in some, and it's darker on one side than the other, but mostly just here because the light is hitting this way. I'm drawing with the side of the pencil. It enables me to color a big area without making the point on my pencil go down. And then I'm just gonna use this to blend it in. I'm gonna add white to it in a minute because it's not a black canvas, it's a white canvas with shadow. And again, I'm going to have to turn this a little bit just because my arms don't turn that way. If you have gotten out of your line, very gentle push, and it's back. Now it's already looking a little bit more 3D for that edge, but we need it to be more the correct color. So we're adding a little bit of white, not tons. We don't want to make it too light of a color. And we're going to blend again. Now you notice here it got too fat, so we just take that off very gently. You can squish this into a line, that way it goes in nice and sharp where you want it to. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the shadows. So inside here, they're not really dark. Ordinarily, when you're working with pastel, you do want to try to go all the same direction. It does show differently, but with some shapes it's kind of difficult to go all the same direction. But you can try. Now there is a tiny bit of shadow underneath the tip of this paintbrush that I didn't draw because it's kind of at an angle. And of course you can't see the what I'm drawing, and I apologize for that, but you know, there's not space here to put both. I've got to turn the paper, sorry. And I am going out of my lines a little bit. I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. When I was doing the shadow here, I actually made it skinnier. I decided I didn't want it quite that fat. Now, on my the real thing, I can see a double shadow. I could draw that, but it's just right now we're just trying to do a simple, much more simple still life. But when you look at whatever you're drawing, you certainly can put in all those double shadows if you feel like you can, but you don't have to. That's the really nice thing about your artwork, is that it's yours, and you do what you think is there. You draw what you see, and everybody's art is different. So what I see Now, see, remember what I was saying about the using this? Look at this. I do not have this shadow anywhere in any stretch of the imagination the same shape as the object itself. The object is here and here, and look, I have a curve going on. Well, that looks silly, right? So I have to make sure that I fix that. That's one thing that I do want to fix. And I'm going to fix it by straightening it out and erasing the part that is wrong. And I think actually it needs to be higher up on one side over here. That's more like it. But that means that then this part in here needs to go bye-bye. And since I pushed hard on here, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So I should have checked the shape of that before I started putting in a lot more color. I'm going to be able to work with it, but it's easier not to do such a blatant thing in the first place. It's still not perfect, but I'm just going to end up making a disaster if I keep trying to fix it. And there's way too much dark here, so I'm going to take some of that off. In order to take off more, you just push harder on the kneaded eraser. It will take off more. If you brush the excess off, it'll smear it, and then you have more to erase. So, and then this little tip right here, I'm just gonna blend that a little bit. Oops, I took it off completely. All right, so that's the beginning of the shadows. You can see it already looks a little bit more 3D. I'm not going to put in the rest of the canvas yet because I want it to stay white, and it won't if I continue. So now we need to work on some other shadows. The shadows on the actual tubes that make them look round. This is before we even start trying to work with color. The shadows on the paint brushes that make them look round. The paint brushes will be easier because they're one color, you know. So what I am going to have to do is put a relatively hard edge right here. Remember, this paintbrush is going over both of these. And then from there, a very little edge here. Don't go over your tube. And I'm going to add, this is silver, and while I do have some pastels in another group that are closer to that, I'm going to add just a hair of a light blue, and it will give the impression of silver once I blend everything in. To make a cylinder, if you have not seen my video on shapes, please look for it. I'm very new to making YouTube videos, so I'm not as up on how you add links. I hope to add the links later, but I know I'm just learning. I'm sorry. I'm like, how do you make a YouTube video? Okay, I'll try that. Now, notice I haven't put in the metal parts yet. We will. So, I'm going to put a hard line right here at the end of the bristles. We're not finishing it, but we're getting it close to finished on the paintbrush. So then I'm going to decide that the metal part is right here, and that is a hard little curve, and another one, and another one. Now, these particular paintbrushes, the metal is almost the same color as the paintbrush, and so you don't see a lot of difference. But there is a shadow right here because it's flattened. That isn't on the other one. Well, it is, but not the same way. Okay, so, I mean on the rest of it. Okay, so now I'm actually blending it with the eraser to pull off some of the color. And I'm going to add white to brighten it up here in a sec. Now I'm getting my highlights and really putting them in. The highlights are just spots on this little these little lines there, and then all down this. And drawing shapes is all about shadow and light. Shadow and light. So that's one, but not the bristles. Okay. We can draw the bristles in a little bit. And so we're going to do the other one. So if I lost you while I was doing that one, it's the same thing on this one, and you can try on this one, and then if I'm going too fast, you can pause until you catch up. I'm trying to go slow and talk to you about techniques and stuff while we're doing it, but everybody draws at their own pace, at their own speed. So now keep in mind there's a paintbrush there, that's why I'm not going there. I'm drawing a light edge here. Here I didn't do as much because of the blue, and I will put blue on this one too, but I think it'll look better if I add just a hair of black. Getting my blue again and putting just a little bit over here on this side. Okay. And one of the reasons why I'm putting in the metal part after I've already blended it is because they're very close to the same color, and I want them to have the same shadows. And this one, there's a darker shadow right there, and it's just because of the way the light is hitting this brush, because it's in a different position than the other one. And then we go and put the bright highlight on that for the metal and for the paintbrush itself. We're almost done, actually. The paintbrush, the tube shouldn't be too hard. These are several different colors, but they all basically have the same markings, and so you can put in those markings pretty quickly. They're curved because the tube is curved. But we have a little bit of gray over here from the shadow, and here from the shadow. And then there's some shadowing in there that I'm going to get to in a minute. Okay, so just gently blend that in. Make sure to go pretty much all the way to the edge there. Reason some of this is darker is because that's color, it's not shadow. I'm not going to draw every little bit on these tubes because I don't want to. And that is an artist's right. They can go, yeah, I'm not drawing that. So, but get as close as you can to what is there, okay? And make sure you define the edge of the paintbrush, because it does exist, the edge. It's not like a shadow. And then this has a little dot in the center. All of them do, because that's how you open the tube. And it does have lines on the tube. The tube is white, and we want to remember that the top is white. It has a little silvery edge here. So the silvery edge we're going to put in by putting a highlight right here and highlights on the edge of, by just drawing lines against it with white. There is a slight grayness right in here. We basically do the same thing on these other tubes. The shadowing on them is different, but not by a lot. Now, later on, if you want to put in a color, you can. I'm not going to put in a color. Again, I apologize. My phone is making noises. put in a bright highlight here, a bright highlight right here, one right here, and on the cap. And we're going to put some, a little bit more shape in here. Now, some of these shadows, I have them way too dark on this one, okay? Because this shadow should seem different than the color on the, I have them a little bit dark here too, so sorry. It should be look different than the black color up here, and it doesn't. This one is on its side, so the shadow is here. And then there's a black marking on the tube right here, and a black marking on the tube right here. And we see half of that little shield mark right here. And then this, and then the cap. We don't see as much of the silvery part, but we do see a little bit. And then, of course, the shadow is here again. So this has to have a little bit more color for the tube. And just pulling off a little bit of that on the shadow, and I forgot to put the black marking on here. I'm trying to draw over here where the tube is, I mean where the drawing is, and I can't really reach, so I made this tube top look really big. I'm sorry. I just realized that it is completely huge. But I'm not going to change it, because changing it, I wouldn't necessarily make it better. I would just make it different. I'm just going to narrow it by doing that. We just got 2 more tubes to go. There's a lot of shadow on the side of this lid, and I have the tube shaped weird, and I'm going to fix that while I'm putting on the shadow. The dark coloring is up here. The little shield mark is right here. and we have the shadow along this edge. And because there's a tube over it, there's also a shadow right here. And this shadow, because it's the shape of the tube, goes at a point. And we see this shadow here. And go ahead and blend that in. I forgot to put in the little black stripe. I suppose since I'm using colored pastels, I can go in and put the colors in, and it might add a little interest to this for you. Especially since I put color on the paintbrushes, so you can tell that one is upside down. Oh, look at, I'm trying to draw with that. That's not going to work, is it? And again, I'm using a metal pencil sharpener. They have a nice even blade, and you make sure that your pencil is firmly in the middle. Don't tilt it, or you're going to just break the lead. Well, I painted the one that should be dark brown. I painted it, I colored it light brown. So now the one that's light brown, I'm going to color it dark brown. And don't worry if your drawings aren't perfect. Nobody's are, but they're yours. Okay. I see tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff that I don't like with my own drawings all the time. So that's normal, and don't stress about it. Okay, and this one is the one that I changed, and so it's kind of weird, so bear with me here. I'm drawing that a lot darker than I would normally like, but I have a lot of lines going there, and I need to be able to see it. Okay, so that's the dark part. And I have too many lines going here. So I've got to pick one. Okay. And there's the thing across here. And there's the edge of the tube. I've got to make the lid look white instead of black. And then shadows here. And we need to put highlights. There's one right here on the beginning of this. And there's some here. And along this edge here. I am pushing kind of hard on this because I want it to show up. I'm not going to add any more dark to that at all. It's dark enough. I'm not at all happy with my cap, but that happened because I kept changing it, and that will happen if you keep changing things. It'll change how things look. Okay, so there's the black of this one, and this is the shadowed area, and here's another black. So we need to make sure that that's defined. I got it a little too dark right there. And then the color on this final tube, it doesn't look like it, but it's red. And honestly, I could make it any color, it doesn't matter. And now that I have the paintbrushes in, I'm like, okay, my shadows are not nearly dark enough. So I need to go ahead and put my shadows in just a little bit darker. And remember, your shadows need to go right up to your objects. Not just, they're connected, just like when you're outside, your shadow is connected to you. It doesn't float away from you. we're almost done. I'm blending these shadows because shadows have kind of, they can have a hard edge, but it's hard and soft at the same time, if that makes sense. Sorry, I apologize for the silence, but I'm not used to talking while I draw. And doing these final blends on this one, and this one. This one here. Okay, so now I need to put some definition in my bristles on my paintbrushes. I'm gonna go ahead and square this one up. And it doesn't have to be, you know, perfect. This one. And then the final thing I would do is go ahead and make this white. If you were drawing on a white background, this is a step you don't need to do because your drawing is already white. But because I'm on a gray background, I want to make this white. And as I said, you should try to for lack of a better word, color in all one direction. I'm really bad about it, but it looks better if you do. And I would, of course, go ahead and blend that in to get a nice smooth look for that. And I'm not going to go any further with that, but you certainly can. And thank you very much for listening. If you enjoy these videos, please subscribe, and I'll see you again next time. All right. Thank you. Bye.